What's up, my fellow Harmonic traders? Welcome back to Tracking the Harmonic, your go-to destination for all things Harmonic technical analysis. I'm your host, Lord MC. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into Harmonic technical analysis and take a look at what to expect in the markets next week. We got some key economic data coming up, including retail sales, building permits, the Fed's interest rate decision, and Powell's press conference. So first up this week, we have retail sales. This is going to give us a glimpse into consumer spending trends, a vital piece of the puzzle for market momentum. We also have building permits. This is going to provide insight into the housing market strength, which is often seen as a leading indicator of economic health. And the big highlight of the week will be the Fed's interest rate decision. Earlier this week, according to the Fed monitoring tool, there was an 85% chance of a 25 basis point cut after the CPI data came out. However, by the end of the week, the odds have shifted back to 50-50 for either a 25 or 50 basis point cut, which brings uncertainty back into the market. So we're going to be looking at Powell's press conference, which will be crucial for gaining more clarity on the Fed's direction for the rest of the year. But before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts on how these events might affect the market, and subscribe to stay updated with future videos. I also want to preface by saying I am not a financial advisor. None of the things I say in my videos or anywhere else is ever financial advice, so question everything, do your own research, and come out with your own conclusions. Having said that, let's jump right into those charts. So first up here we have SPY. We finished the week at 562.01, where the high of the week was 563.03, where it got very close to almost attempting the all-time high. So what can we expect harmonically here for SPY, as we still are looking at the bullish black swan on the daily? Let's bring up my indicators here. We are looking for potential next target here from the black swan at PT3 at 599.08. As you can tell, the HSI did cross the midline, and if it reaches the overbought conditions, that could be anywhere between the current price action and PT3 at 599.08. So something that's interesting here, as we go over to the weekly, we did have a new harmonic pattern formed. This is the bearish T-crab. This is calling for a potential reversal back down to target 1 for a type 1 reaction at 482.25, but right now it's obviously unclear whether it's going to go for the type 1 or the type 2 return to hop there at 618.44, which is now a new target at a new potential all-time high. So right now you can look at XA as a level of resistance around 561.48. If you're able to close above that, then we'll be looking towards hop there at 618.44. If you do find some resistance here based off the bearish deep crab off of XA target, then you'd be looking for a reversal back down where maybe you can come to finish that type 1 reaction at 482.25. So the HSI off the weekly is at that midline right now, approaching that midline. So we're going to see if we get resistance there, or we come back down to maybe test the 21 EMA at 539.65, and then the 50 SMA around 503. Obviously coming back down there would complete the type 1 reaction at target 1 at 482.25. So still unclear. If we're looking at the bullish black swan on the daily here, you can see that the volume the past 3 days has been on decreasing volume. MACD finally flipped green. The HSI, like I said, did cross the midline. So if we can break above these targets here, I do think we're going to potentially see the retest of the all-time highs, and then maybe create a new higher high for a new all-time high. In the event that we don't continue pushing up here, maybe we do consolidate until the Fed interest rate decision comes out. We could come back down to test these levels here at 557. Below that, then you have obviously the 21 EMA at 553. There is resistance, there's support there around 553 and 551. Coming back below that, then you have the targets here to the downside at 544.19. So right now, in my opinion, it looks like we may be entering consolidation phase until the interest rate decision, as we don't know what the market is pricing in yet. In my opinion, the reason why we did go as low for the week, we went, I believe, as low as 539.96 there, is because I think, in my opinion, that the market anticipated a 25 basis point cut. They priced that in, which is why we got to 539, and then obviously we rallied up at the end of the week. But now, like I said again earlier in the video, that the Fed monitoring tool is suggesting now a 50-50 chance of a 25 or 50 basis point cut, which brings back uncertainty. So in my opinion, I do think because of that, we might consolidate potentially until the interest rate decision comes out, and maybe we get a glimpse of what Powell and the Fed is going to do moving on forward. So definitely keep a close eye on the SPY. Jumping over to the triple Qs here. So the triple Qs has this bullish black swan on the daily. We did close the week at 475.34. It did manage to close above PT2 at 472.93. So harmonically, we'd be looking at PT3 at 553 down the line. Obviously, there's going to be some resistance levels on the way up. I do want to mention that the triple Qs, unlike the SPY, still has a bit of ways to go before reaching its all-time high. One thing I do want to bring people's attention to is the retracement that we just got from the most recent swing low to swing high. If we take that fib retracement up there, we did come down very close to the 618, did find support above it, and now looking like it wants to continue for a higher high. So the next level I would be looking up to the upside would be 485.37, 485.54 there to hit that resistance level where the HSI arrow triggered there. So if you continue pushing above that, then you do have a gap to fill all the way to 493.15, and then above that, then you have the previous all-time high of 504.16. and break above that, then we'll be looking at that PT3 target down the line. If you're not able to hold above PT2, then the next level I'd be looking at would be where the 50 EMA is at, roughly around 467 and 468. Below that, you can come down to PT1 at 454.04, and then 450.72, where you did manage to hold support there at the 618 from the swing low to swing high. So right now the HSI arrow is approaching the overbought conditions, and in my opinion, if it goes to the extreme levels, that could be towards that 485, where you might find some resistance and another HSI arrow could form. Or we could be looking at here above PT2 just to consolidate until that interest rate decision comes out. If we go over to the weekly here, the weekly did move on increase in volume. Obviously, there's no harmonic pattern here on the weekly. This is invalidated because it pushed above hop, formed this bearish shark pattern. So we are looking now just for upside here. If the strength of the Qs pushed up, in my opinion, because of the semiconductor space was pushing at the end of the week. We had NVDA, AMD, TSM, all these semiconductors rally up at the end of the week. So if the semiconductor space is suggesting more upside here, you could potentially see the triple Qs continue pushing for a higher high. But in my opinion, I do think we're going to consolidate around that, around this range here in the 470s before we continue pushing either to the upside or to the downside based off what the interest rate cuts are going to be like. So definitely keep a close eye out on the triple Qs. Jumping over to the Dow Jones here. So the Dow Jones has this bearish crab pattern on the daily. You can see that it went for a type 1 reaction, came for a type 2 return, consolidated between XA and target 1, and it's now looking like it wants to go for that return to hop there at 422.61. So the Dow Jones, comparing to the SPY and triple Qs, got very close to testing its previous all-time high. So its previous all-time high was at 416.55, where it did go as high as this week as 416.31, missed it by 24 cents. So in my opinion, the Dow Jones looks very strong. Volume has been increasing this past 3 days. Obviously high volume on Friday, where it got very close to test that all-time high. So what can we expect to the upside here for the Dow Jones? The next level I have would be to test 420.72. Then above that, then you would complete the type 2 return from this bearish crab pattern at 422.61. The HSI crossed that midline, which could suggest that more upside is incoming to reach the overbought conditions. That obviously pushes it towards maybe around that hop target of 422 or even higher. If we go over to the weekly here, you did manage to hold some support above the HSI midline, and on the weekly you have this bearish steep crab pattern here, which is calling as a next target at 426.55. If the HSI reaches these overbought conditions, in my opinion, I think you see a higher high above hop there at 426.55. So in my opinion, the Dow Jones is very strong here, suggesting that it wants more upside. In the event that you have some resistance here on XA and you're not able to hold XA, then the next level I would be looking at would be 412.35. There is a small gap to fill there because it did gap up from Thursday to Friday. That gap gets filled at 412 even. Below that, if you don't find support at that gap, well, then the next level I'd be looking at would be the 21 EMA at 408. Obviously the 50 SMA EMA is support there, so that would be your next target at 404 and then 401. So based on the volume here, the Dow Jones looks very strong in my opinion, so you could see higher high there for potential hop at the end of the week. So definitely keep a close eye out on the Dow Jones. Jumping over to IWM here. So the Russell 2000 has two patterns on the daily. I'm going to be talking first about the deep crab. The deep crab here, you obviously at the completion of the pattern, you came for a type 1 reaction, and then you attempted a type 2 return but ultimately failed, and you were stuck between XA and all the way to target 2. At the end of the week, you did manage to close above T1, where you went as high as 217.25 before closing the day at 216.83. So what can we expect harmonically for this pattern? The HSI did cross the midline, which could suggest that if it wants to reach the overbought conditions, that could be towards that XA target there. That is a level of resistance, in my opinion, that IWM needs to break above, because the many times that it has attempted here has always come back down. So Right now, what it's looking like it's forming is a potential double bottom there. For those of you who aren't familiar with harmonics, a W formation is also known as a potential bearish harmonic that could be forming, right? This would be a level, the X, A, B, C. You would create the next leg up, which would be point D, and you would expect a reversal back down. So for those of you who don't follow harmonics, you could just look at this as a W formation, which is a double bottom. The neckline would be around this range between 220 and 221. Obviously, a double bottom is a bullish breakout, and if you break above that neckline, then you can see targets to the upside that gives confluence for the deep crab pattern at XA, and then 233.44. In my opinion, you do need to break above this level here at XA with volume. You did try, it had decent volume attempts here, but ultimately it has fallen short there every time it comes up to that 224 to 225 range. In the event that IWM here finds resistance, the next level you would be looking at would be that T1 there at 213.16. Maybe close the gap there that it left from Thursday to Friday. That gap gets closed at 212.78. If we go over to the bullish black swan real quick, you can see that it did close above PT2 there from the bullish black swan at 216.43, which could be resistance there. You can see that a few times it did break up. You did come back down for a retest of 216.43, tried to make a higher high, but ultimately it fell. So right now, those are the levels I'd be looking at for the bullish black swan to see if it continues to hold above PT2. Obviously, PT3 here is calling for a new all-time high at 248.36, and that would be a bullish breakout. The volume, like I've said, is increasing on the day, so it looks strong just like the Dow Jones. If we go over to the weekly does have this bearish white swan pattern where you did close above PT1 at 214.39, and it is approaching that HSI midline. So in my opinion, I do think you might just be consolidating above PT1 in the event that you get momentum to the upside based on the interest rate decision. Then you'll be looking at targets to the upside at 228 and 238 OPR off the weekly pattern there. So to the downside, if you find resistance here at the next level, like I've said, you'd go fill that gap, PT1 at 208.90, and then maybe come back or a retest at target 2 at 204.82. You have slight support there at 203.15. Very good support actually, because you have high volume here where you did manage to get good volume and you rallied up there. So the 200 EMA and SMA is a last level of support. In the event that does fail, then you could be looking at CD at 196 and then OPR at 188.02. Right now, in my opinion, IWM, just like the Dow, is a bit strong in my opinion. So I'd be looking to see if it consolidates, and if there is bullish upside here in the markets, then you'd be looking for higher targets for IWM down the line. So definitely keep a close eye out on the Russell 2000. Jumping over to XLF here, the financial sector currently has this bearish crab pattern on the daily where it closed at 44.51 to end the week. You did have some bearish downside in the banking sector. As you can see that the XLF did come down to 43.38 towards a 50 EMA and SMA there. So right now there's some uncertainty there with the banks here. You have a bit of indecision candles, so see if this is going to actually continue pushing up or finding some consolidation here. The volume, as you could tell on the sell side the past 2 weeks, has been on increasing volume, and the buy side has been on decreasing volume. The HSI did reach almost the oversold conditions, and it looks like it's curling back up to test that midline. That midline could be where that hop is at. A break above that, then you could look at 45.86 and then a new all-time high. If we go over to the weekly here, you did close below hop at 44.59 off of this bearish shark pattern. So you'd left with almost what looks like an indecision candle. You can call that maybe a hanging man. It's still, in my opinion, off of increasing volume, suggesting maybe some level of resistance here or consolidation. You did manage to hold above the 13 EMA and still above the 9 EMA. So in the event that you fail this level, the next level I'd be looking at would be the 1.13 of this pattern, which is at 42.92, and then the 21 EMA around 42.55. Below that, then you have the terminal bar at 40.47. In the event that the terminal bar does not hold, then they can get very bearish, and you can look at the target one there down the line, but obviously it's too early to tell. I just want to quickly cover here JPM. As you can see, the momentum JPM lost on Tuesday. You did come down almost, I believe, close to 10% if I'm not mistaken, from the high there down to the lows of 8%, 8.25%, where you did engulf off a high volume. So this is actually, in my opinion, bearish here for Chase. So some of the banks also look similar to JPM's charts. The next level I'd be looking here for Chase, just really quick, would be 197 and then 192, maybe a retest of the 200 EMA there. So banks, in my opinion, are something to look at right now, especially with the interest rate decision. We could see some potential downside here for the banks. Ultimately, it's going to be dependent on whether the Fed is going to cut rates by 25 or 50 basis points. So we're going to see how the banks price that in. So back to XLF here. If you have some bullish momentum, then like I've said, you want to break above 45 and then a retest of the all-time highs at 45.92. If you do find resistance here, then I think we could come back down to maybe that XA at 43.80 and then fill the gap, because there is a gap that it left here at 43.13. So my opinion, if we also draw a swing low to swing high there, we can see where it has retraced to. Got very close to the 50% retracement. So much like the SPY and the other ETFs, I think the SPY came close to the 50. The Qs went to the 618. So if this is the level that it is finding support, then we could see potential upside here for the financial sector if we get bullish news from the Fed. So definitely keep a close eye on the financial sector. Jumping over to XLE here, the energy sector, very bearish in my opinion. Looking at here at this bearish shark pattern, obviously you lost target 2 there at 88.39. You have a death cross that did cross on the EMAs, and you continue to make lower lows. At the end of the week, you did go to 83.09, and it's now finding some resistance at the 9 EMA off of decreasing volume. So the attempts to the upside have been on decreasing volume, while the push to the downside has been on increasing volume, right? So looks, in my opinion, a little bit bearish here for the energy sector. If we go over to the weekly, you did lose a 50 EMA, and you did lose it off of increasing volume. So I'm looking at these targets here. You have this bearish shark pattern here. Well, this is obviously past the 30-bar rule, but we can look at these levels still for levels of support. The next level here, as you could tell, that the HSI almost did like a double top over that midline. You did fill that midline, and if it reaches these oversold conditions, I do believe that's towards around that $80 range there, and to the 200 EMA at 78. In the event that it does get bearish, then you can see maybe 74 for that oversold extreme condition. If it goes to around where that 80, that gives also a confluence level from a previous harmonic shark pattern that formed here back in March. Obviously this is invalidated as it's past the 30-bar rule, but you could still look at this level at target 2, which never hit, as a level of support, which gives confluence to, like I said, the weekly target there around this range around 80, where it did find support the last 2 times it came down here. You kind of double bottom there, tweezer bottom, and you continue pushing higher. Want to cover really quick crude oil here. And looking at his chart also on the weekly, I've been tracking crude oil here for a while. I did think that it was going to come down below $70 a barrel, and ultimately you did go as low as 65.27, where HOP is now calling at 52.83. Volume started to pick up, like I said, on to the downside as increasing volume has come in, where there's no indication of buying pressure right now. You did have some here and here, but ultimately is off of decreasing volume. So we could consolidate, maybe wait to see if a buyer step up here. You did have a death cross on the weekly as well in the SMAs. The yellow is the 50, the 200 SMA is that red line there. So you did cross below it. Maybe right now you could look like you come back up towards that $70 a barrel around where XA. If you find some resistance like you did attempt at that target, you could be looking for hop down the line. So definitely keep a close eye out on the energy sector. Jumping over to Apple here. So Apple's chart, in my opinion, at least during this past week, looks a little ugly here in my opinion. I do not want to be stuck in this range here. So looking at Apple, the 50 EMA has held support. You see these wicks down here where it has held above 50 EMA there. You did go as low as 217, and you also went as high as towards that 225, where you finding resistance. So you could be stuck within that $8 range. I do have a level of support now, 221.58, where it likes to just hover around that intraday as well, and ultimately either closes below or closes above it. So in my opinion, you could be looking at a consolidation phase, maybe just waiting until the interest rate decision comes out, and maybe you break out to the upside or to the downside depending on what the Fed says. So right now you'd be looking at here to the upside targets, because you did cross the HSI midline. If you get some volume picking up, then you'd be looking towards, again, that 232. Above that, then you do have the previous all-time highs at 237.23. You could tell here that this volume here has been off a decrease in volume, and you did have some bearish momentum on Friday. But if you go over to the weekly tells a different picture, where it is off of increase in volume. The spread of the previous candle on the weekly here was much wider off of decrease in volume. So this candle could be suggesting a bear trap. We did get this hammer candle here on the weekly, which could suggest upside and a reversal back up. So I have a trend line there around 229, 230. Above that, then you see maybe the previous all-time high. A new level here would be 242.22 that I have drawn from previous all-time high to swing low, and that is calling for a new all-time high at 242.22. So to the target to the downside, if you lose 221.59, then you definitely want to come back down to see if you can lose below the 50 EMA around 219. Below that, 217. If you fell 217, then you can get very bearish for Apple. But right now it's looking like it wants to enter a consolidation period to see whether it's going to continue upwards or ultimately come failing that 50 EMA and make a lower low. So definitely keep a close eye on Apple. Jumping over to Microsoft here. So Microsoft is looking very bullish here in my opinion. You did generate a new bullish dragon pattern on the daily where it did get close to touch the 1.272 of the pattern here from C to D at 433.86. So you are getting some nice volume picking up here for Microsoft here. So you are finding a bit of resistance here at these areas because the HSI is at the overbought condition right now, and that could be towards that 433.87, which gives confidence for maybe a retest of that 433.86 target. If you break above that, then the next level I do have would be 457.26, and then finally to complete the type 1 reaction would be at 468.35. If you do find some resistance here and you do generate an HSI arrow to the downside, you want to see that off of high volume to suggest a reversal is incoming. In the event that it does happen, you're going to be looking at targets here back down to around 418 to 420. See if it finds support above that. If it finds support, then maybe you could see that type 1 reaction target 1. If it fails, then you can come back for maybe a retest of the 200 EMA at 406. Below that, then you do have BC there at the 886 of the pattern at 390, and then OPR at 374.37. So the volume looks very good on Microsoft here. Maybe you do reach a consolidation period here. You did break above the C target there, so that's what you want to see as well when you do a type 1 reaction. You want to see it close above, so you are getting some bullish momentum. Maybe you enter a consolidation period here where you're just waiting for the interest rate decision to come out. If we go over to the weekly, you can see that the weekly, the 50 EMA SMA has been a huge level of support. You did come back down there. Now this is off of increase in volume for the week, and you're looking like you want to attempt to touch that HSI midline off the weekly there. So in my opinion, like I said, that's around that 433.87. A break above that, then you can maybe start looking at a retest of the all-time highs at 468.35. So definitely keep a close eye on Microsoft, as I do think, in my opinion, there is plenty of more room to the upside. Jumping over to Amazon here. So Amazon on the daily bullish shark pattern. At the completion of the pattern, you can see that it went for a type 1 reaction, and then it just consolidated between the target 1 and the 200 EMA as a level of support. And right now you did break above the target 1 here, broke above the 50 SMA, and is now finding some resistance around my line there at 188.65. The HSI still got some room to the upside before it reaches the overbought conditions. So if you break above 188.65, then the next levels to the upside would be looking at would be the gap fill at 192.24, and then to complete the whole type 1 reaction to target 2 at 195.55. If you do find some resistance here, you know, I would be looking just to come back to test the 50 SMA because you did break out of that level there. So that would be a healthy retest around that 180. Maybe you do shake some people out and you go to target 1 at 176.41. But if you find support there, then you'd be looking for a higher high. If you don't find support at 176.41, then you'd be looking at the 200 EMA at 171 and change. If you lose that level, then it can get very nasty for Amazon all the way down to the terminal bar at 151.61. Obviously, we're still far out from those targets, so I'd be definitely looking more so as Amazon goes into a potential consolidation period here until the interest rate decision comes out. If we go over to the weekly here on the bearish shark pattern, you can see you're finding resistance as well on my line, and you have the terminal bar there at 189.77. If you break above that, then you have hop there at 203.04, which would create a new all-time high. Below that, then you can come back down at OB at 175.95. The 50 EMA there at 168. You did come back all the way down to 151, which is why I said if you lose the daily target there around around 200 EMA, they can get very nasty here for Amazon, where you can just come really quick to that terminal bar. That gives confidence to that level, but we're a little bit far away from that. The HSI did cross the midline to the upside off of the shark pattern, so if it goes to the overbought conditions, then you're looking at hop there. In my opinion, you might be trading between the terminal bar this week, which is around call it 190, and then 176. Depending on what the interest rates are going to be like and what Powell's going to say moving forward, and maybe we could see targets to the upside or to the downside depending on what the direction the market chooses. So definitely keep a close eye on Amazon. Jumping over to Tesla here. So Tesla currently has this bearish three-crab pattern on the daily. You did go as high as 232.67 before closing on Friday at 230.29. You are having some momentum here, some bullish momentum to the upside here for Tesla, and it's looking like Tesla wants to break out of this range here. If it can break above 235, in my opinion, it can get very bullish here towards an attempt at 260, and then maybe even the highs there at 271. You do have a gap to fill right at 245.63, a break above 258.89, and you can see hop there at 275, and then there's another gap to fill at around 289 and change. Right now the HSI is approaching the overbought conditions. The overbought condition still has, so you still got room for those levels there, which could be towards that 260 target in my opinion. I do have a level of support now. This used to be resistance at 223.79. This was drawn from a long time ago, I think a year ago, that is now breaking above. So and this is off of decent volume, so if you manage to hold above, then I'd be looking now at this range between 223 to 260 on Tesla. If we go over to the weekly, you can see that there's that bullish Gartley where you did go as high as 271 there. So the 200 SMA right now is looking like it's a level of resistance right at the entrance of that gap as well. The HSI is approaching that midline, so it's a huge level of resistance. Makes sense, right? You break above the 200, SMA gets bullish for any stock. When you break above the 200, it means that the bullish momentum could be shifting. So if you break above that, things can get really interesting for Tesla. Maybe even just a shot up towards that at 52-week high there at 271, and above that, then you have major targets down the line to maybe even 300. So looking good here for Tesla for a potential breakout. In my opinion, Tesla will stand to benefit from the interest rate cuts. So if we get 25 or 50, it's going to be dependent on what the Fed is going to say. So definitely keep a close eye on Tesla. Jumping over to Google here. So Google on the 1-day time frame here has no current harmonic pattern forming. It did get some decent volume here towards the end of the week from Wednesday to Friday, where it did find some resistance at the 21 EMA and ultimately closed just slightly below the 200 EMA here. So harmonically, we don't have anything here yet. If you take this the Fib retracement from the most recent swing high to swing low, you can see that it's finding some resistance there at the 236. So we could also take a Fib retracement from the most recent swing high to swing low, which was around here. And you can see that it's finding resistance at the 50% retracement. So a break above that, you go towards the 618 around 160, you will shift the momentum back bullish within this swing high to swing low from the high there August to the low here back in early September. And maybe you could switch momentum back up bullish. So some resistance at the 21 EMA at 158 to the upside. Above that, you can see the 50 EMA around 164. See if it breaks the high there at 168.64, where you did have a resistance level there. You kind of went for a shooting star, and ultimately above that you had the 50 SMA at 168 and change, and have a gap fill up to all the way up to the 181 level. In my opinion here, for Google to be bullish back again, you definitely want to break above minimum the 50% retracement, which is around 162, and the 618 would be around 169.54, and that obviously shifts the momentum back bullish. So Google is trying here to break to the upside, but ultimately still below 200 EMA. Anytime a stock, in my opinion, is below 200 EMA on the daily, it's considered bearish. So it is trying for a potential attempt to break that level. If you go over to the weekly here, something that's very interesting, you do have this bearish arc pattern, which kind of get invalidated after it broke above hop. But we're just looking here at levels of support and resistance, and you can see that the most recent swing high to swing low, you came down below the terminal bar, losing the 50 SMA, and ultimately found some support, and now you are generating an HSI arrow to the upside where you had the HSI reach the oversold conditions and you form that HSI arrow, potentially signaling that a reversal is incoming. So for this weekly pattern here, you definitely want to break above hop right around 161.10, and then ultimately with the 21 EMA is around 164 above that, then you can start looking for levels to the upside. So definitely keep a close eye on Google. Jumping over to Meta here. So Meta currently has two patterns here on the daily. We're going to be talking about the bearish pattern, and then we'll talk about the white swan that it has as well. The pattern here, as you can tell, reclaimed X8, so 2 candle closes above, one more candle close, maybe you consolidate there, you can start looking towards hop there at 548, where you do have a bit of resistance. Above that, I do have a new all-time high level at 567.41. If I bring it over here, the TTH indicator, you can see that you do have a black swan pattern where you broke above PT2, so this is calling for a much higher target there at PT3 at 604.71 down the line, maybe a psychological level of 600 if the market is going to continue to the upside down the line. That's obviously going to happen within this month, maybe towards the end of the year rally if seasonality is a thing. If we do have a bit of resistance here and we come back below XA at 518.15, and the next level you'd be looking at would be to fill the gap, because it did gap up from Wednesday into Thursday. There's a small gap there which gets filled around 513.12 below that, and maybe you have another retest of PT2 right where the 50 SMA is at on the daily at 504. The last few times that it did come below the $500 range, because you did go as low as $495 of the week, you ultimately managed to close still above PT2. So in my opinion, it's a little bit bullish here for Meta for a continuation to make a higher high. If you could take the retracement here from the most recent swing low to swing high, you could see that it came down to the 50% retracement and it held support. So the HSI still got room to the upside before it reaches the overbought conditions, and that could be where that hop level is at, and maybe even the new all-time high there at 567.41. If you go over to the weekly, you do have the white swan here, where you're looking at a potential retest here of CD at 542.81. So you did go as high as 544.23 above that, and you break the momentum back bullish, make a higher high and break out of this range, and maybe see OPR there on the weekly at 577.71. So the HSI on the weekly is holding above the midline as support, so we'll see if that is going to hold. Otherwise, you can come see maybe targets to the down again to PT1 at the 21 EMA at 493.80. Obviously too early to tell for that, so it's all dependent on what the interest rate decision is going to say. So definitely keep a close eye on Meta. Jumping over to Netflix here. So Netflix, no current harmonic pattern on the daily, but I am looking at here at a break, potential break of $700.99, just call it 701. As you could tell, you never closed above that target. You did manage to close very close here, but you had a few attempts and you always came back down below that $700 range. So if you're able to close above $700 and change, then you will come back potentially testing the all-time highs there at 711.33. Right now it looks a bit bullish here for Netflix. As you can see, the volume has started to pick up again, and you could also argue the case that this is a potential cup and handle forming, right? This is the cup right here, this would be the handle, and now you're potentially breaking up to the upside. If we go over to the weekly here, you do have a white swan where you have 4 attempts this week to get above that $700 range. That's the CD there target at 697.41. Ultimately, if you break above that, then you go to OPR, which is calling at 739.78. So my opinion here, Netflix looks pretty good to the upside. In the event that you have resistance at the $700 range, and you can come back down to test the 90 EMA there at 684, the 21 EMA at 680, and then support there would be the last level at the 50 SMA, which is around 659, 660. Break below that, then you shift the momentum back bearish, in which case you could see targets to the downside from 609 all the way to the 200 EMA as around 597. But definitely keep a close eye on Netflix. I do think if a breakout happens here, you're going to have a potential new all-time high on Netflix. So I'm personally going to be watching the 701 range. A break above that, then it gets me really excited for a potential break for a new all-time high on Netflix. So keep a close eye out on Netflix. Jumping over to NVDA here. So NVIDIA and the semiconductor sector here had quite the week. You started to push up on Monday. Ultimately, you could see that on Monday you had the HSI arrow trigger on NVIDIA, and Wednesday being the highest volume of the week. Ultimately, Thursday and Friday you did decrease, but still on average volume as we started off the week. So what can we expect here harmonically? We don't have a harmonic still forming on the daily, so I am looking at this potential W formation. So like I said previously, a W formation in harmonics is a potential pattern that could be forming, and that this pattern, this W formation, could be a bearish reversal, right? But you would have to create, this would be your level C. You would have to create your point D here up above, anywhere above the midline of this W formation. So you can see if either it's going to be a bat, a shark, a crab. Still too early to tell. But you could also look at this as a W formation as a double bottom. So your neckline would be here around that 120, 130 range. A break above that neckline, then obviously you could see potential attempts to new all-time highs. So if we go over to the weekly, you can see that the 21 EMA has pretty much held support. You did close below last week, but ultimately managed to close above, and now you're back at closing above the 9 EMA here on the weekly, finding resistance at my target line at 120.88. That's where you felt short there at the high of the week, was 120.79. So I do think a break above this, you can start looking at these targets here at 132.66, and then the new all-time high would be at 144.71. So if we go over back to the daily here, you can see that you're having a bit of resistance. You close the day on Friday with a doji candle. That's an indecision candle. Maybe you're waiting for the interest rate decision, see what happens there. So like I said, if you break above 120.88, NVIDIA likes to be in that 132 to 120 range. As you can see previously before, you had a break out to the upside here, but it was ultimately a false breakout, and you came back down within that range again here, had some chop, ultimately lost that level. So back in early August, mid-August, you also traded between that range and ultimately fell below. So now you're trying to break above it. So if you break above it, I do believe you'll be within that $12, $13 range. Above that, then you have, like I said, the previous all-time highs there at 140.76 and a new all-time high calling for 144.71. If you do find resistance here at this 120.88, the next level you'd be looking at would be the $115 range, right where the 90 EMA is at. Below that, then you can get bearish back again, and you can see maybe go down to the $100 range, maybe even the $97. As you could tell also that the HSI is approaching the overbought conditions again, and that's very close to that 120.88 line. So I'm going to put a little bit of respect at that level. Should you break above it, then you can get bullish. A rejection of this with increase in volume to the downside, or you can get bearish back again. So definitely keep a close eye out on NVIDIA. Jumping over to Bitcoin here. So Bitcoin had a bit of a rally at the start of the week. You did come down below to around that 52.5K range and ultimately rallied towards that 60,000 level. Again, closing above the 50 SMA here on Friday. But right now you are starting to form some volume to the downside, although it's very low. We'll see if volume picks to the downside again. You did generate an HSI arrow like you did back here when you did have an attempt at the 200 SMA. It ultimately came back for you came down for a lower low there, and right now you could be arguing the case that this is just creating a lower high. If the volume starts to pick up, because you did have some volume on Saturday here, the 14th, with relatively low volume. So right now this is suggesting a weak attempt on the bearish case scenario. So if volume starts to pick up, then you want to see to the downside levels here to lose that 58K range. Below that, then you can come back for a lower low back to 52K and maybe even come down all the way to 48K. If volume tends to find some support here, volume picks up to the upside here, the next level you'd be looking at would be that 64K range. You could argue here that you're also potentially forming a cup and handle, right? So you created the handle or the cup over in this area here, and right now you're maybe forming the handle. So if you start seeing that the volume is coming down or is kind of consolidating to create that handle, that's what you want to see off of the formation, because you're waiting for that breakout. Ultimately, right now we are watching the death cross as well, the 50 EMA and the 200 EMA. There, the 200 EMA is a green line and the 50 EMA is a blue line, and it got very close for that death cross here during the early parts of the week. But ultimately, the EMAs are starting to curl up again. We'll see if that's the case. If we go over to the 3-day here, we're still tracking the dragon pattern. As you can see, that the 50 EMA right now is resistance, and if you do come back get rejected there, then you'd be looking at the 1.272 of the pattern at 52.3K. Below that, then you have target 200 EMA at 47, 48K, the 200 SMA around 43, and then you complete the type 1 reaction all the way to 38.5. If we go to the weekly, you can see that you could also see that this is a potential bull flag, right? This is a bull flag, longest bull flag here, trying to see if it's going to break to the upside, because if you break to the upside, then we can see targets on the 3-day back to 71K and then a new all-time high at OPR, which is calling around 78K, maybe even that 80K range. You did generate an HSI dot here, which is doing a check back from the previous HSI arrow here. So if you're able to close above the 21 EMA, then I'd be looking again to test that 69 to 70K range. The HSI is approaching that midline, so a little bit of resistance there. So right now, Bitcoin or crypto in general is it's in a weird spot here. So I definitely watch out if it breaks above, that 60K and it goes to that 70K for sure. In my opinion, at least, it is bullish breakout to potentially see a new all-time high. If you get rejected around these ranges, then we could see targets to the downside based on the 3-day pattern. So definitely keep a close eye out on Bitcoin. Alright guys, so that's it for me. I hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend. I will be streaming from market open to market close. I stream every Monday to Friday, so if you want to catch me, I do stream over live on Twitch. Link to my Twitch in the description box below. Having said that, I hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday, and I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow. Take care, everybody, and peace.